Unless you've been living under a rock for the past 15 months, you may have noticed that there's been a little bit of censoring happening across the internet. You know, a smidgen of blocking, a morsel of banning, a trickle of deletion. But this insanity didn't just start 15 months ago. No. It started way back in 2018, and it's been ramping up ever since to where we are now. Kind of like how we've ramped up from 2 weeks to flatten the curve to this.
Get vaccinated or wear a mask until you do.
So what happened back in 2018 that started this trend of banning, you ask? Alex Jones happened. Comments on Sandy Hook started a trash fire across the internet like nothing we'd seen before. And as was said at the time, sure, freedom of speech is important and banning people is wrong, but Alex Jones is different. We can make an exception this one time. He's dangerous after all, but it's never just one time, is it? Instead, it quickly became other extremists, and then racists, then people who promoted intolerance, then hate, and so on and so forth. That one-time exception eventually even reached the President of the United States. So after all of that, who's left? Oh, that's right. Doctors and scientists. But only the ones we don't like, of course. The ones who disagree with the consensus. Because, you know, innovation has historically come from experts who think and act like everyone else. Isn't that exactly what they said about Tesla? That he was a real social butterfly? And now that the targets have slowly changed, the tactics have as well. While the strategy was once to attack a person's character or slightly bend the truth, now it's to rewrite history itself. We've now entered the phase where we are straight up 1984 Ministry of Truth style rewriting history. So what do I mean by this? Well, recently there's been a lot of attention on Dr. Robert Malone after he appeared on the Dark Horse podcast to express his concerns regarding the mRNA vaccine. Now, why is Robert Malone's opinion on the vaccine important? Because he is the literal inventor of the mRNA vaccine.
They were aware that there was a risk of a spike being biologically active and having adverse events if it did not stay stuck to the cells that were transfected, that got the RNA and made it. Okay, and they used a genetic engineering method of putting a transmembrane domain on it to ensure that it stayed anchored and stayed put. And they did limited non-clinical studies to say, looks like it stays stuck. Right. We engineered it to stay stuck.
They did,
and they published that. Here's the thing:
specially engineered.
That's generally not good enough in a non-clinical data package. So before we get a product released to use in humans, in the normal situation where we're not in a rush, we have some really rigorous tests that have to be done in animals. And revealing that spike gets cleaved off of expressed cells and becomes free is something that absolutely should have been known and understood well before this ever gotten put into humans. So I'll just leave it at that.
Here come the thought police. I'm sorry, sir, but you've had too much to think. We're gonna have to revoke your medical license. Unsurprisingly, he's been attacked online due to his relevance to the conversation, and social media scientists have made shallow attempts to attack his character. But like I said, none of that was enough this time. It goes even further. By visiting an archive of Wikipedia's RNA vaccine page on the Wayback Machine, we can see that on June 14th, he was extensively included in the history section of the page. The page reads, in 1989, Robert W. Malone, P. Felgner, et al. Developed a high-efficiency in vitro and in vivo RNA transfection system using cationic liposomes, which were used to directly introduce RNA into whole tissues and embryos, as well as various cell types. The term and idea of RNA as a drug is first described in this paper. Then in 1990, John A. Wolfe and Robert W. Malone demonstrated the idea of nucleic acid-encoded drugs by direct injecting in vitro transcribed mRNA or plasmid DNA into the skeletal muscle of mice which express the encoded protein in the injected muscle. These studies were the first evidence that in vitro transcribed mRNA could deliver the genetic information to produce proteins within living cell tissue. The first mRNA vaccine experiments were carried out by P. Felgner, J. Wolfe, G. Rhodes, R.W. Malone, and D. Carson P. They completed a number of mRNA vaccination studies that resulted in 9 patents on mRNA vaccination, with a shared priority date of March 21st, 1989. Fast forward 2 days later, and just 5 days after the release of the podcast, and the entry has been changed to remove his name and downplay his involvement. In 1989, researchers at the Salk Institute, the University of California, San Diego, and Vikel published work demonstrating that mRNA using liposomal nanoparticle for drug delivery could transfect mRNA into a variety of eukaryotic cells. In 1990, the University of Wisconsin reported positive results where naked or unprotected mRNA was injected into the muscle of mice. These studies were the first evidence that in vitro transcribed IVT mRNA could deliver the genetic information to produce proteins within living cell tissue. The use of RNA vaccines goes back to the 1990s. The in vitro demonstration of mRNA in animals was first reported in 1990, and the use of mRNA for immunization was proposed shortly thereafter. In 1993, Martinin demonstrated that liposome-encapsulated RNA could stimulate T cells in vivo, and in 1994, Zhu and Berglund published the first evidence that RNA could be used as a vaccine to elicit both humoral and cellular immune response against pathogens. Since this June 16th edit to remove Robert's name, further revisions and edits have been made to leave the page a ghost of what it once was. Hungarian biochemist Katalin Karikó is now praised as the pioneer of mRNA vaccines. And why would that be? Well, because she's the senior vice president of BioNTech. You know, the creator of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. I imagine that it really wouldn't bode well for BioNTech to acknowledge the actual inventor when he vehemently disagrees with how this technology is currently being used. She also just so happens to be a Hungarian communist spy, but that's a topic for another video. Now, what makes this all especially concerning isn't really Robert Malone's contribution to this scientific discovery. What makes it especially concerning is that this entry is not only discrediting him, but this is revisionism of history. The literal rewriting of someone out of their own scientific discovery. Maybe someday, if we find a journal where Einstein espoused something that we don't quite like, we'll witness some more of this revisionism to history. And rightfully so. Because history doesn't belong to those who make it, it belongs to those who publish it. You know, a lot of people say dating is so much harder right now during COVID, but I actually feel like it would be a lot easier. Like, I mean, you could see a person on an online dating profile with a mask on their face, and you already know 90% of their values. You know their values, and you know their political beliefs. You know probably their religious beliefs. Your odds are already pretty good. You know, when I was online dating, I had to look for little clues to figure out if somebody was an idiot. I had to look for little things, you know, like if a guy mentioned anything about his love for tacos or avocados, or if he said he liked hiking. I mean, I live in the middle of the city. Where the fuck are all these people hiking? These people all say they're hiking, and then you meet them, and you know, they have very maternal bodies. These men have hips. They have big fat asses. They're more voluptuous than I am. And I'm like, where are you hiking? Trekking up 2 floors in your building because your elevator is always broken because you live in the middle of the ghetto. I wouldn't really call that hiking.